This presentation is on writing Pensées in particular, in other words, writing thinking papers, but it is in a series of 4 presentations on critical writing, reading, critical thinking, and reflective reading and writing. So there are 4 parts to these series of presentations. This is the first one. This audio presentation in particular will give you a brief overview to what's contained here. We'll deal with critical thinking and reading and writing, the structure of a pensée, how we might assess that critical writing within a pensée, and then some final thoughts. So first of all, defining or thinking about what critical reading and writing are. I've put together 4 related presentations. They should work together or they should work independently for you. First one, this one, is on critical writing, in particular pensées and reading. The second is critical writing and reading, but it's a more in-depth presentation that gets down into the deep detail of how you would engage with critical writing and critical reading. The third presentation is a short one just on the critical thinking process, and the final one is a 4th presentation on becoming critically reflective practitioners and handle some of the basic critical reflective models that you may have come across previously or in previous study or in your own professional practice. To accompany this presentation and to enhance your learning, there are a number of key resources that you might want to look at afterwards. First is the Moodle resources that include Jenny Moon's Learning Journal material workshop. Second is 2 websites. The University of Surrey and the University of Cumbria have very good student material on studying, reading, writing, and all those kinds of things. And when all else fails, there's always Harry Potter and the Pensée. Check it out itself, the film, or check out the magical objects and Harry Potter on Wikipedia, and you can find how useful a Pensée might be if you can find one. So to begin with, it's always good in the first case to think about, what am I thinking about this subject? Where am I coming from on this? What do I want to know? And what at the end of this presentation am I hoping I'll have answers for whatever is bothering me at the moment. So stop the slides here, print off this slide if you want, or take a piece of paper and write down the questions that you have about writing a pensée and critical writing in general. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What are you concerned about? What do you think you know? What do you think you might not know? Jot it all down so that you have it and you can refer to it then at the end of this presentation. So let's move on. Critical thinking, reading and writing. To a large extent, critical reading and critical writing are underpinned by critical thinking. What I mean by that is, if you can't or if you're not aware of how to engage and how to develop the skill of critical thinking, then obviously critical reading and critical writing become that much more difficult. So critical thinking, reading and writing involve certain sets of things or assumptions. The first one is a refusal to accept the conclusions of other writers without evaluating the arguments and evidence provided by them. Second one is that a balanced presentation of reasons why the conclusions of other writers might be acceptable or may be acceptable to you, or indeed that you might treat them with caution. Thirdly, a clear presentation of your own evidence and argument, showing how you've arrived at your conclusion. And finally, a recognition of the limitations of your own evidence, argument, and conclusions. So critical thinking is important because it stresses the importance of asking and answering questions. In our everyday life, we use the term critical, but we don't use it in the same way as it's used in academia. In our life, if we talk about somebody being critical, then they're often seen as being negative or destructive. So being critical in an academic sense means not nitpicking for the sake of nitpicking. In academic work, The purpose is to get as near as possible to the truth. So critical thinking in any subject or discipline is the way in which this is done, along with more specialized applications of theory, the methods and techniques which have been developed for that particular subject within that particular discipline. So in short, critical thinking then is an attempt to ask and answer questions systematically. So it means asking the most useful questions in the most productive sequence in order to yield a coherent and credible story. So what would those questions be? Let's start with the most common ones. What, who, where, when, how, why. And then the phrases that follow those. What if, what next, so what. So in attempting to answer those questions systematically, you help fulfill three vital functions for any serious study. So there's a three-step or three-stage model that underpins what I'm talking about in terms of critical thinking, critical writing, and critical reading. And the three steps or stages are description, analysis, evaluation. So in short, critical thinking is asking questions instead of accepting things at face value in terms of what you read or hear. So critical thinkers look for evidence and for good reasons before believing something to be true. So this is at the heart of what it means to be a scientist, a researcher, a teacher, a scholar, or a professional in any field. So whatever you're studying, critical thinking is the key to learning and to making progress. So moving on then to the model. To summarize what we've said so far, the diagram or the model shows how asking and answering questions helps to fulfill three interconnected functions of description, analysis, and evaluation. So the first step, description, incorporates the questions what, when, who, and where. The second step of the model, analysis, incorporates how, why, and what if. And the third step of the analysis of the model incorporates what next and so what. So it's a fundamental or basic model of critical thinking, and it might help you organize your thoughts and organize your reading and your material. So what do you need to do? Well, when you're describing, you're trying to define clearly what you're talking about. You need to say what is involved, where it takes place, or under what circumstances, and a more complex description becomes analysis. So step 2, analysis, is examining and explaining how parts fit into a whole, given reasons, comparing and contrasting different elements, showing your understanding of the relationships between things and within things, and in this way analysis forms the main part of any in-depth study. And the final step or phase is evaluation. So we evaluate, and when we evaluate, we judge the success or failure of something, its implications and or value. So evaluations lead us to conclusions or recommendations, and they're usually found at the end of a piece of academic work, a paper, a chapter, or a text. So to summarize what we've said so far, the diagram shows how asking and answering questions helps to fulfill the three key interconnected functions of description, analysis, and evaluation. These are reliable for introducing, discussing, and drawing conclusions about your topic. So when you begin with what, that's a systematic questioning that will encourage you to consider every aspect of your topic or your question or the paper under review. Then you should aim to address most, but not necessarily all, of these questions for your topic or your subjects. The crucial questions for almost any topic are what, which defines the issue, why, which explores it in depth and addressing causes and using theory, and how, which helps you to look at the processes at work, and so what, which helps you make judgments or conclusions showing what you have reflected on within the paper or whatever it is you're reviewing. The model can be used in a number of different ways at different stages of tackling an assignment. You could use it before and during your reading. You could use it for planning the structure of a whole assignment, but you could also use it to structure each point within. So when we apply this model, what are we doing? Well, we're presenting something that somebody can critically judge on the basis of what we have presented as description, analysis, and evaluation. So what are the kind of questions that we would have as an author reading this or as an assessor reading your paper? Well, the first two are directly speak to description. What is the author's position? For example, a Pensée paper, one piece of writing. What is the author's position? What is the author's line of reasoning? And then you move into analysis. What evidence is used, and is it strong evidence? And evaluation. Does the evidence support the conclusions? Are the writer's conclusions meaningful? The structure of a Pensée then is something we need to move to. So we have our model, 3-step stages: description, analysis, and evaluation. So now let's look and see how that compares to the basic structure of a Pensée. Part 1 of a Pensée is a summary of the point of view of the author of the work analysed. In other words, it's a description. So within the first part of a Pensée, 1.1 identifies the main idea, 1.2 the important facts the author bases his thesis on, and 1.3 how the author appeals to his audience or her audience, or what they use to draw people in. That's descriptive. Part 2 then is made up of the other two parts of our model. In the first instance, analysis. Section 2.1, we analyse the leading facts presented by the author. Well, we've already identified those in 1.2. So this second part of the Pensée, the analysis of our key points, is probably the most in-depth and detailed part of the Pensée. And then we move on to an evaluation of the logical consistency of the author's statement. So we evaluate the analysis, we evaluate what the author has tried to do. And then we compare that finally in a Pensée to what we know ourselves or to your own practical experience, either as an adult learner or as an adult educator or FE teacher tutor. So that's simply what a Pensée is. And if you think about the model to generate critical thinking, description, analysis, evaluation. So how is this assessed? How is your Pensée assessed? Quite an interesting question. Probably one you've wondered about. So let's have you think about how you would assess your critical writing. So in the first instance, have you stated what the author's position is? Description. Have you identified the author's line of reasoning? The evidence that's used, is it strong evidence? Would you believe it? Is it trustworthy? Is it valid? Is it reliable? And finally, does the evidence support the conclusions? And are the conclusions meaningful? So in your evaluation, do the conclusions logically flow from the evidence that you've identified when you analyze the paper and from the description of what the author was going to do or set out to do in the first place? The next slide will give you a small example of a piece of writing, and what I'm suggesting you do is that you read this critically and you decide whether this piece moves from description to analysis to evaluation. So take some moments to read the slide, pause the presentation, read the slide, and think about, does what's written here move from description to analysis to evaluation? Obviously, you have the answer down the bottom of the slide. The answer is, of course, that it presents lots of references or evidence, but it lacks analysis of these references. So take a minute or two to think about that and to work out how you can see that happening within that paragraph. As far as assessment of the piece of writing is concerned, well, there are two key questions that address the 3 stages of our basic model. So, does the paper have a descriptive piece? Does it have an analysis? And does it make an evaluation? So based on those 3 points, is this a good piece of academic writing? Is it a good example? And secondly, can you identify if and where it follows the critical process? And if you can work that out and where it doesn't on that slide, then you're doing really well. Final thoughts. My final thoughts are very simple, just 2 key thoughts. First one is the model. description, analysis, evaluation. What, when, who, where. Analysis, how, why, what if. And evaluation, what next. So it's a fundamental model to create critical thinking and help you organize your thoughts and your material. Remember, the model can be used in a number of ways at different stages of tackling an assignment. You could use it before and during your reading, for planning the structure of a whole assignment, and also to structure each point within it. Well done. Now exercise what you have made sense of today and tackle a reading or something of your choice and write a pensée on it. The final slide sets out the various references and links and support materials for this presentation. Thank you very much.